Good day, this is Professor Will, CBMD, PhD. Today is Wednesday, March 27, 2019. It is 9:37, 4 seconds Eastern Standard Time. And this is a reading on environmental microbiology and microbial ecology. So let's get started here. Environmental microbiology, the study of microbial habitats, microbial activities in those habitats, and the types and amounts of microorganisms in specific places in the environment. Microbial ecology, the study of microorganisms' relationships with their environment, and the microorganism-animal-plant relationship that shapes Earth's environment. The carbon cycle. Microorganisms decompose once living organisms, plant animals, and other microbial life. The step known as decay may be thought of as the beginning of a new carbon cycle. As its most basic, the carbon cycle consists of two equally important conversions of carbon from a gas to a more complex organic compound. When microorganisms decay dead organic matter, these microorganisms are called decomposers. Decomposers get their carbon for their own use, as well as energy by breaking down animal organic matter, proteins, glycogen, fats, and nucleic acids, and plant organic matter, cellulose, hemicellulose, pectin, and lignin. The various species that decompose these substances for their survival are called heterotrophs. Heterotrophs, also called organotrophs, need an organic carbon source to survive. For example, heterotrophs use sugars, amino acids, or nucleic acids, but cannot use the gas carbon dioxide, CO2. Heterotrophs oxidize the organic compounds of decomposition in a metabolic pathway called aerobic respiration. These microorganisms make energy for growth and maintenance by respiration and produce water and carbon dioxide as end products. The carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere becomes the carbon source for a new group of organisms, photosynthetic organisms. Plants, algae, and cyanobacteria compose the majority of Earth's photosynthetic life. Organisms that use carbon dioxide as their main carbon source are called autotrophs. Autotrophs convert carbon into carbohydrates, proteins, and fats that make up cells. Aerobic respiration and photosynthesis complement each other for recycling carbon through the atmosphere, soil, and water. As a result, microorganisms and all higher organisms receive the carbon they need for life, whether the carbon occurs in a polar bear eating a seal, an eagle eating a salmon, or a human eating a salad. The carbon cycle also contains side routes through which carbon flows. The four principal modifications to the carbon cycle are 1. Anaerobic fermentation, 2. Sedimentation, 3. The methane cycle, and 4. Production of humans. Anaerobic fermentation involves the breakdown of organic compounds by anaerobic bacteria. Fermentation produces a variety of carbon-containing end products that each take different routes in the larger carbon cycle. Depending on the species of anaerobic fermentation might produce the gases methane, CH4, carbon dioxide, or hydrogen. It might also produce alcohols and acid. The end products of fermentation feed either the sedimentation process or methane cycle. In sedimentation, decayed organic matter from fermentation sinks into the deep sediments of Earth's crust. Hundreds of thousands of years pass, and as the pressure of Earth's crust bears down on the carbon material, it turns into coal, crude oil, and natural gas. Some of the anaerobic activity on the organic matter serves as the source of natural gas, which is methane. Other anaerobic microorganisms specialize in producing methane or in consuming methane. If these bacteria do not take part in sedimentation, they participate in the methane cycle. About 75% of the methane in the atmosphere originates in biological sources such as anaerobic microorganisms. Anaerobes produce this gas in a process called mineralization, by which complex organic compounds degrade to carbon dioxide and methane. The anaerobes that execute this reaction are methanogens and belong to domain Archaea. Either the methane rises into the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas, or other microorganisms absorb it for carbon and energy metabolism. Such microorganisms are called methanotrophs, and many of them also belong to the Archaea. The nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is the fourth most common element in cells, making up 5% after hydrogen 60%, oxygen 25%, and carbon 12%. Most of nitrogen resides in proteins, which compose of about 50% of cells, and in nucleic acids, deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, and ribonucleic acid, RNA, which make up about 15% of cell components. Nitrogen is additionally the main component in Earth's atmosphere, accounting for 78.1% oxygen, totals 20.9%, and other trace gases make up the remainder. Nitrogen is stored in the biosphere in a diverse variety of storage called reservoirs or sinks. Because of the broad array of nitrogen reservoirs, the nitrogen cycle often serves as an excellent model for studying biochemical cycles. All organisms need the nitrogen cycle to supply the nitrogen needed for making proteins, nucleic acids, and other cell constituents. To begin the cycle, the large reservoir of nitrogen in the atmosphere must be made available for use by living organisms. Because higher plants and animals cannot use nitrogen gas directly, they depend on the activity of soil and water. Microorganisms to capture nitrogen from the air. and convert it to ammonia, NH3, in the step called nitrogen fixation. The energy-demanding process uses the enzyme nitrogenase to convert N2 to NH3. Two types of nitrogen-fixing bacteria capture nitrogen from the air, free-living and symbiotic nitrogen-fixing bacteria. The sulfur cycle. The sulfur cycle resembles the nitrogen cycle in two ways. First, chemical conversion of sulfur involve many different oxidation and reduction states, and second, effects of human activities in the form of acid rain and other air pollutants impact the sulfur cycle. The sulfur cycle contains oxidized sulfate groups SO4 to the power of 2 to reduce hydrogen sulfate gas H2S. Sulfur is the 10th most abundant element in Earth's crust, and for this reason bacteria have an ample supply of sulfur compared with more limited supplies of nitrogen. Sulfur appears in cells and amino acids, cysteine and methionine, vitamins, hormones, cofactors needed in energy metabolism, and enzymes. The phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus exists almost exclusively in the phosphate form PO4 to the power of 3 in the environment and biota. This chemical group is required for energy metabolism and energy storage in the body. For example, the energy stored in the phosphate of adenosine triphosphate ATP serves as a central compound in aerobic and anaerobic energy production in all cells. The phosphorus cycle involves changes between soluble and insoluble forms in organic and inorganic compounds rather than oxidation-reduction reactions of the nitrogen and sulfur cycles. Also, phosphorus does not enter the atmosphere as a gas. The phosphorus cycle is confined mainly to land and the ocean. The terrestrial phosphorus cycle uses water and moist soils, rivers, and lakes as part of food chains. In the ocean, phosphorus progresses through marine food chains. Long-term phosphate storage occurs in rock and ocean sediments. In both locations, the phosphate cycles very slowly to other chemical forms. When members of food chains die, decomposer bacteria and fungi release phosphate-containing compounds. Bacteria that excrete the enzyme phosphatase cleave the phosphate groups from compounds, and these molecules dissolve in water as salt. Salts may be absorbed directly by plant roots and enter food chains, or autotrophic bacteria take up the phosphate. Autotrophs are organisms that can use carbon dioxide as their main carbon source. Autotrophs carry phosphorus into additional food chains to continue the cycle. When microorganisms capture phosphate groups in this way, the process is called phosphorus immobilization. When phosphate-containing compounds re-enter the environment when plants, animals, and microorganisms die, the process is called mineralization. Good day, this is Professor Will, CBMD, PhD. Today's Wednesday, March 27, 2019, and this concludes my short definition on environmental microbiology and microbial ecology. Hope you enjoy listening. Have a great day.